Welcome back, everybody. It's Thursday night. You may see some different faces in these seats next to me, and that's okay. We're going to have a little fun tonight. We got a special guest. We got an even more special topic. We're going to be talking rookie running backs, which I know everybody has a comment and an opinion on. But first and foremost, we thank you guys for hanging out with us and joining us here on YouTube and Facebook or wherever you're watching or whenever you're watching. If you watch us after the fact, we appreciate you hanging out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, notification icon. You can stay up to date. We're pumping out rookie profiles like Antonio Cromartie's kids are coming out. So we got lots of videos coming for you. We thank you guys for everything you do. With that being said, we got a special guest tonight. So he's a guy that I'm newer getting to know. I am in one fantasy league with, and I'm connected to him on Twitter, and I'm getting to know him a little bit more and more every day. His name is Chad Wyatt. I appreciate you joining us tonight, Chad. For those that don't know you, give them a little intro. Tell them what you're all about, and pump some of your content. What are you doing?
How's it going? Appreciate y'all having me on, man. Like I said, pretty much just on Twitter at ChadW_FF. Really, I try to help people out. Really just do this stuff for fun. Like I said, I want to hop on here. I love talking football. From down here, South Carolina, 30 years old. Like I said, football is pretty much my passion. Hobby has been since since I've been, watching TV basically.
Are you
So yeah, that's what I love to do,
are
man.
you a Gamecock?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
buddy. So you know all
Yeah,
the
it's more the
insider
time
business
these
on
days.
She Smith, then, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm hoping to snag him in a couple drafts late.
He's well, I
Trying to
I
keep
just
it
got done
quiet on him.
evaluating him. He's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I like old Shy. He's a good one, man.
Is that how
Like
they
I
is that
said,
how they actually
we're sleeping
pronounce it?
on him too, I think. So he's gonna be all right, I think.
Yeah, he's a fun one. All right, Kraig, what's up, man? Welcome back. It's good to have you for a second week in a row. How are you? Uh-oh. I think you're muted, Kraig.
Oh,
Apparently, I was. Is that better?
I'm supposed to mute you, not you supposed to mute yourself.
Well, you got to get your practice in for next week. We'll leave that surprise for people. But yeah, you wanted me to, or you needed someone to come and pinch hit for you tonight with Brother Paulie out having fun. So I'm back, dipping into the offensive side. Glad to have our guest here. Like you said, we're all in the same league, and I knew Chad was a Gamecock fan because once upon a time, before you managed to get him, I had inquired about Brian Edwards, and that was going to be a no-go. But you guys got a deal done recently, so congratulations on that, Brad.
That's
yeah.
that's what happens when you want to win a championship. He came running looking for some help. That's for sure.
And Chad's the guy I can't beat. 3 years in a row, he's been kicking my butt. So
Yeah, been good run so
I
far.
can't guarantee the fourth, but I gave him a good leg up. I think.
Yeah, shit. That wasn't looking good going into this off season.
Well, that's why trades are all about helping you get better in the off season. Let's just hope it works come game time.
Pays off, yeah.
All right, so we're talking rookie running backs tonight. This is gonna be a fun one. I know my normal co-host on here, has some strong opinions about our first guy. He is not a Najee Harris fan, I will say that much. But Najee Harris, running back from Bama, appears to be kind of the consensus top running back for most people that aren't Paul. I don't. I kind of have him at the top of my board mostly because he really did impress me in 2020. He really added to his game from the receiving perspective. He really seemed to get better all around, and it showed out. So I'll start with you, Chad. Give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think about Najee. How do you feel about him as a rookie prospect and his dynasty perspective? Just let me know your thoughts on him.
I was a big fan of Najee. Coming out of high school, he was like a number one recruit coming out. When he went to Alabama, it took him a few years to kind of get rolling there, but I was hoping he was coming out last year, with that class, but he ended up staying out this year. I mean, for me, he's been at the top. I would have had him one of the top guys last year. I love his versatility, I love his size. Really, the only thing, to knock on him about, he's 23. I think he just turned 23 a couple of days ago. But other than that, I mean, I'm not really worried about that too much. That second contract might be a little tougher to get, but like I said, there's not too much to not like about Najee. He tore my Gamecocks up. I know that. Had some highlight reel plays against us. That one play was spectacular. Catching and breaking tackles and making guys miss. shifty in space. He's just to be 230 pounds. He moves pretty well. So not a whole lot not to like.
Absolutely. What about you, Kraig? What do you think about Harris?
Yeah, right now he's my number one guy on the running back board too. I agree with a lot of what Chad said. Some of the things that I've seen about him are, questionable hands because he didn't have to be doing a whole lot of that in college. Questions on his pass protection, but those are the same sort of concerns that people had about Jonathan Taylor coming out last year, and that he just wasn't called on to do it a whole lot or hadn't had a whole lot of experience with it in Wisconsin for Taylor. And that turned out fine, clearly. By the end of the year, he was shown he was able to be that lead back on a team. And I don't know if we're going to have the same sort of situation. We'll have to see where Harris goes. But I think those concerns are something that he can show, within his first year, whether or not it's going to be a problem. And I expect, given his work ethic and what he's been able to do and rise to the top there in Alabama, to be a really good pro player. I don't have a whole lot of concerns about him. He doesn't have that top end speed. That's one of the other things that you hear about him. I know Paul's big comment on him is about his top end speed, but you don't have to have that either in the NFL to succeed. Clearly with Alabama, they played a lot of future professionals on defenses in their conference, and he was able to do well against them. So I don't really have a whole lot of concerns. There's always things to improve on for any of these guys, but he is my number one.
Yeah, I mean the thing when I look at the running backs, especially nowadays, I try to see where if a guy I feel has to be in a certain type of scheme like a zone or something like that, then I start to it kind of moves things around for me. Najee Harris is a guy I think is not scheme dependent. Like he can be your big power back if you need him to be. He can be your one cut north south runner. He can be a pass catcher if need. Like he really can do all the things you need him to do. And in his size, he can take a beating. Like he's not been injured very often. He looks like a very durable back. So he's a guy that I feel confident with. If you need a running back in this draft, he's kind of the surefire. I don't know. I don't want to say he's in a tier by himself because I love Najee, Etienne, and Javonte Williams. They're kind of my tier by themselves, but he's definitely worth one of the top 5 picks for sure.
The one thing you say is you don't think he's scheme dependent, and I agree. And there are some guys that we're going to talk about probably tonight that I do feel have to be in a certain like zone blocking scheme or something like that. Got to throw this out there for Paulie, who's not on tonight. I just don't want him to go to a team like Seattle because history tells us that guys from the West Coast named Harris that go up to Seattle and try to go off, it just doesn't end well for him. So there's your in memory of Paul, one per show. And we can move on to your number 2 guy on our list, Brad.
Ugh, that was porous at best. You need to bring your A game. All right, so I'm going to go with Javonte Williams, but it really could be Etienne or Williams at this point. I think Javonte is a guy that I think is very similar to Harris in the fact that I think he could really do whatever you need him to. I love his size. What is he like? 5'10", 5'11", 220-ish. He's got the prototypical running back size. He's got the speed. I mean, even with another high, I don't want to say high-end running back next to him and Michael Carter, but another really nice running back next to him and Michael Carter, he's still balled. I mean, like he's still balled out, and it was really impressive. Like I really like what I saw. I mean, especially in this draft class, a guy like this that could be a featured back, I mean, you just don't have a lot of those. So I'm really excited about the prospects of him. I think he can do it all. I think he's got a lot of, kind of like Nick Chubb in him, where you're surprised when you see that pass catching ability, but then when you watch him, you're like, well, that makes sense. I mean, the dude he's got that it factor. So Chad, what do you think about Javonte Williams back from UNC? How do you feel about him?
I have him 4th. I don't know when I watched him and Carter together. I don't know, maybe Carter just makes him look slower, but when I watched Carter, he just looks so much more explosive. I do like Javonte. Like I said, he got some pass catching skills. I think he had like 25 catches last year, which is pretty good. Kind of reminded me of David Montgomery, like some of his best traits. I don't know if they translate well to the NFL. I don't know if he's going to be shedding off guys the way he was, but I mean, I like him. Like I said, he's got some speed, got some contact balance, and pretty shifty. So I like him. I got him 4th though. I got him and Etienne and Carter right there in a little tier. right below Harris.
So Harris is your 1, and then you got a tier of 3 below him. That makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and Michael Carter I like. So my struggle with Michael Carter is a little bit of his size. So he's a little bit undersized at 5'8", 202. But we saw guys like Devonta Freeman be successful
Yeah.
for a period of time. I mean, obviously injuries caught up to him.
When I speaking from a fantasy perspective too. Like I said, a lot of these guys. I think Carter would be more of a PPR guy. Like Williams. That's like you said. I'm maybe more of a grinded out. I don't know if he'll just take over a backfield and see how he does receiving. I just feel like Carter will have a better chance carving out. A better role for score more points, basically.
For
Yeah.
sure. I mean, that was my thought on Carter. He really is a PPR back. Kraig, what do you think about Williams? And what do you think about Carter, his running mate there at UNC?
So in style, I have Williams sort of like in between what you see with Harris and what you see with Etienne, who I know that we'll talk about here, and that he's sort of a mix of the two, where he doesn't have that complete top end speed and as explosive athletic ability as someone like Etienne, but he isn't built the same way as Harris. But he sort of does everything well. There isn't a lot that you can point to as like, all right, this just isn't good. I just don't see him as quite the same level of. They're probably within the same ish tier, but I don't see them as much upside overall as I see with Harris. But the one thing that I did see that I liked about him with the pass catching, which he does do significantly better than Harris because he was also called to do it more, that he helps his quarterback out. He knows how to make himself available and be out there, a busted play or something like that. And that clearly serves people well in the NFL when they transition, which gets us the fantasy points, when they're having a dump off or something and then making something out of it for their quarterback. Especially if you're going to be able to do that and you're showing the willingness and ability to pass block, you're more likely to be on the field sooner as a rookie. And that's, again, helpful for fantasy. So I really like Williams. I have him as my 3. So right in the same sort of range.
I like.
And Carter, what you guys basically said. I mean, he's not built to be an all-down back in the NFL, but if he's a change of pace, third down back, and he's getting those receptions out there, sort of like someone like Sproles did for quite a while in his career, can certainly be fantasy relevant for you.
And I like this question. Wilson over on YouTube is not necessarily calling me out, but asking a follow-up question. I mentioned how I think Javonte could really profile as a lead back, and he says, Brad, I like Williams too, but you say Williams could be a lead back. How did he not keep Carter on the bench? Is he Drake-like and not a full-time RB1 for a team? So when you look at both these guys are super talented. When you have those types of really talented players on your roster, and look at North Carolina, their wide receivers are just not great. Like there wasn't a lot of options out there that were worth, I think, much. Like when you look at their best skill players, Williams and Carter were the top of those guys. So you want those guys both on the field because you want your playmakers out there. When you look at, a guy like Carter, he profiles, like we said, more as a pass catcher. So what's happening is you're getting a guy like Carter on the field at the same time as you're getting a guy like Javonte Williams on the field. And they both, when you look at their stats, even in 2020, they both got the same amount of receptions. And actually, Javonte Williams had a better per catch average at like 12.2 yards a catch. So it's kind of a weird thing because when you look at them, they really were neck and neck. 157 carries for Williams, 156 for Carter. Carter actually had more rushing yards, but then Williams had more receiving yards. It's like, okay, this doesn't make no sense because both these guys are getting used basically the same amount on the field. So really for me, it's that I like a bigger back as if I'm looking for a higher guy when it comes to a rookie draft, if I'm looking for some of the characteristics I look for is durability. So at 5'8", 202, can Carter stand up to the NFL beating he's going to take? I think Williams has a better chance of being able to do that at 5'10 and like 215, 220-ish. So that's really where Carter is just a little bit behind Williams for me. Like Carter, I think he's 5 or 6 for me. So he's not far behind. So Wilson, really what it comes down to me is size. Like I think Williams can stand to take a bigger beating and still has the ability to profile as a lead type of running back. Carter, I think, is a very dynamic running back as well, but they both got used in very similar roles at UNC, and they both got this basically the same amount of action. I mean, it's a toss up. Do you like smaller guys that are that can be big play threats? Do you like a bigger guy that can take a bigger workload and maybe not break under the pressure? Pick your poison,
Yeah.
Sully, what's up, brother? Glad to see you over there on the YouTube. Jay Wall says Carter was also a senior and Williams was a junior, which I think plays a role. Good. I mean, seniority does play a factor into that. So, you guys have anything else you want to add about Carter or Williams?
I think you covered it.
we said all that needs to be said. All right. So the other name that keeps coming up, we can't not talk about him any longer. Travis Etienne. Chad, tell us what you think about Mr. Clemson. I added another 10, 20 pounds of pure muscle and crushed my pro day today.
Yeah, pro day looked good. Was it 215?
Yeah, I think it was 215, and when he played it, 208 or something.
I got him at 2. So yeah, that 4.4 helped today. It looked good. He looks fast on tape. Like I said, he does have some concerns. Like I've seen some people, seen somebody the other day compared him to Kevin Coleman. It reminded me of Coleman. Maybe if he gets in one of them little Shanahan wide zone, sticks his foot in the ground and takes off, think he can strive and something like that. So I think he'll be a little more landing spot dependent than Harris will be. But big plays, explosion. I mean, he's fast, and I like him out of the backfield too. Pretty good catching the ball too. So he'll be able to do that as well on the next level. Like I said, I have him at 2 right there. He's in the tier up a little bit.
Mr. Kraig, what are you thinking about Mr. Etienne?
Yeah, I like him, and I didn't like him as much as I did, years prior even, but you can't knock. He's athletic. He's got that explosive ability. He is a really good catcher, and he's got the balance. He's got the top-end sort of speed that you want. And if he does increase that strength, I mean, if he does keep that muscle, because we have seen guys, pro days before get themselves up, and then whether or not they can keep it in the NFL is a question. But assuming he does, having more of that power and be able to break more tackles is going to serve him well in the NFL, because that is something that I've noticed, he wasn't always able to do in situations you thought he might. And then, we harp on this with a lot of guys, but you never know until they get to the NFL. Just his pass blocking is inconsistent. And for a guy that catches as well as he does and has that explosive ability, once he gets the ball on his hands, you want him on the field for those downs to have those opportunities. So that is an area he's going to need to shore up. And part of it, I think, is just, going to be in the pros, learning what is your assignment, what do you need to do, so you can just make that decision and go get that guy. Because, having that instinct of, all right, I need to go here and block this guy is what the really successful guys do. Getting in the way is, the second part of that, of course. But with his size, I don't think he'd have a problem, at least being a road bump to give the quarterback that extra second or two, which is sometimes all they need in the NFL. So that's my couple big concerns. And, the strength and power. Like I said, he looks a lot better right now. I mean, just in terms of being cut. But that's also kind of what we'd expect from someone like him that's probably a high draft pick. You don't want to see him just slumping off and doing nothing when he's had this time to prepare. So he's doing all the right things right now, and he probably will be a higher pick in the NFL.
Right.
And I do like him. I mean,
I wouldn't
pass block that gets you off the field. We've seen that with CEH this year. Coming off the field, just about every third down, it seemed like it was me drafting 101. I mean, it was tough to watch. So that pass blocking, does mean a lot.
Right. Well, and I wonder. So, everybody's loved Etienne now for going on 3 years. I mean, in the Devy world, he's been a hot name. Everybody's wanted to have a share of Etienne. I wonder if he's been in the limelight, kind of like Trevor Lawrence. He's been in the limelight so long that people get kind of tired of talking about him. So I wonder if he dipped a little from that, because I really don't see anything about his game that doesn't make me think he couldn't step in and be a featured back that can play in a lot of different schemes. I don't know if he's truly scheme transcendent, but I think he's not far off. I mean, we saw he's got the pass catching ability. He's got the running ability. I mean, he had 2 seasons where he topped 1,600 yards, so he can handle a heavy workload. Like, there's not much I don't like about Etienne. Jason over on YouTube wants to know if we have an ideal landing spot for Etienne. I don't know. I heard a rumor that he's going to wind up in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, right?
Sure.
Think about the teams. Obviously, think about a lot of teams could use a dynamic running back like him. You know, I mean, Wilson over on YouTube mentioned Arizona would be a good landing spot in his mind. Arizona needs a running back. I mean, obviously they said Chase Edmonds is their guy, but that's laughable.
Second yeah, let's see him out there.
So, Kraig, where do you think he would be a good spot for him?
I don't try to do a whole lot of that projection sort of stuff myself. Um, I don't really want to sit here and speculate because honestly, I haven't gone through and memorized what team needs this and where he's going to fit best. But kind of like to your point, you could see him in a lot of situations and doing well. And this might kill sort of like both their fantasy value, and I'd say they wouldn't do it, but after last year, who knows what they're doing. But I'd see him as a really good compliment to a guy like A.J. Dillon. Fantasy wise, it wouldn't be great for us, but real life for the Packers, their styles are very different, but they're complementary. And in that offense with Aaron Rodgers, for real life, I think it could be great. Again, I don't think the Packers should do it, and I don't think they will. But after last year, I'm not putting anything past them either. So,
Well, when somebody asks me about landing spot, I try to think about teams that have kind of that glaring need. So a team Arizona, obviously Wilson was a great one. First thing that came to my mind was like a team like Atlanta, who's got all the skill position players, isn't going to keep Todd Gurley around, could use a running back in the early second round, although they have plenty of other holes. With a new head
yeah.
coach, like I could see him going to Atlanta, and if he goes to Atlanta, he'd be successful. I mean, they've got everything they need. Whether you like or don't like Matt Ryan, he's still got plenty of left in the tank. So, you slot him in there with Julio, Calvin, Russell Gage, and you got plenty of juice with Hayden Hurst at tight end. I know we got a J Wall in here, so I want to make sure I did a Hayden Hurst drop. Our boy J Wall
Isn't
loves
he
some
ready to
Hayden Hurst.
retire?
What's that?
Isn't he retirement age this year?
I think he got his AARP card in the mail.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So there you go. I don't know if that really helps you at all. Landing spots are always tough, Jason.
Buffalo juice up there. Yeah.
Well, and that's
they
the
like
problem.
players too, so.
Well, I mean,
If we assume that teams are drafting just based on need or something like that, I mean we see every year with teams just doing something crazy. You look at Seattle, some of these guys that they have drafted in the first round over the past few years. The Raiders always seem to just take someone for speed, even if they don't necessarily have a need or just overload at the wide receiver position or something. It's so hard to just speculate on what these teams are going to be doing. We can point to this situation would be great, but that's why for a lot of these guys, your rankings are going to move after the draft.
well, and think about it. I mean, nobody expected a team like Green Bay to draft a running back in the second round when they had Aaron Jones and Williams. Like, what?
Right.
What do you need another running back for? You need,
especially Dillon.
Oh yeah, especially Dillon. All right. So next up, I'm gonna go with Kenneth Gainwell from Memphis. He's kind of a name that seems to be flying under the radar. I don't really hear a lot of people talking about him right now, but I didn't see anything that made me think that he wasn't worthy of being one of the premier backs in this class. Chad, what's your thoughts on Gainwell? I'll let you start us off on it. Let me know what you think about him.
Typically, I like bigger guys, and I think everybody has a type. Like you said, I tend to lean more towards bigger guys. I just got a really good receiving ability. Seeing they was lining them up outside, lining them up the slot, running routes, catching balls down the field, tracking it, catching them over his shoulder. It looked good. He is a little raw. I think he said he redshirted the year, and he's really only played running back for 1 year. I think he was a high school quarterback. So really he's only played running back for 1 year. And, that Memphis, a lot of guys coming out of Memphis putting up numbers. But it's exciting, dude, fast. Like I said, catch real well. So I think he'll do real well in PPR. I got him down here. I got him just behind Sermon and Hill. So I got him, was that seventh? Like that? Yeah, I got him seventh right there behind Sermon and Hill. So, I got him there. Got some questions about him, like I said, his size, how he's going to adjust. Like I said, landing spot's going to be big, But good-looking guy, though. Good-looking player.
All right, Mr. Reith, what do you think about him?
Yeah, he's a guy that I started looking at a lot earlier in this season. Not the playing this year, but just in terms of tape and looking at him in background. And like you said, not a lot of tape on him, which is concerning at times. His size, he is bigger than like Michael Carter, and I do like him more than Michael Carter. I see him as a better version of Michael Carter myself, even with that 1 year. He just has that electric, type of style like Etienne. He's a really good receiver. He's got that burst and speed. He's willing blocker. He goes out there and he's trying, which again, you can refine it if you're going to put the effort in, like we talked about some of the quarterbacks last week. Whether or not these people end up growing from where they are in the NFL is going to be dependent in large part when it's not one of those things that you just have, like, speed or size. So if he's willing to continue to improve to block, I think he's going to be successful. And if you're talking about a PPR league, I probably have him in my top 3 right now just because I think he has that ability. And if he goes to the right team, he just has that sort of electric level of play that I could see him, being sort of on that receiving end of what Kamara is. I don't think he'd, be Kamara himself because, there's only a couple of those guys, every few years. But, you have to remember, too, there's a reason Antonio Gibson, had played behind him originally. I mean, when Gainwell was on the field, he was just amazing. So we'll see what happens. Landing spot will matter for me, depending on his usage. But right now, just in terms of what I'm looking at him as a fantasy asset, I have him top 3.
Memphis seems like it's becoming running back you, man. I mean, Antonio Gibson, now Gainwell. I mean, they're starting to have a type of player that they keep pumping out. How do
Bowden,
you compare him to a guy like Gibson? What do you think coming out? Do you think Gibson was a more refined prospect because he had more time in the system? How do you feel about the two?
I think Gibson is more NFL ready in terms of his size and style of play, being able to be on the field for more different things. Whereas I don't think Gainwell's probably going to be one of those guys that you can put out there you know, for the most part, those days are gone by, period. But you don't want to have him out there for 20 carries a game or something like that. Whereas I think Gibson, with a complimentary back behind him, could hold up to a workload better like that. But in terms of just that electric play style, getting the ball in their hands and making something of it, I think they're really similar. With Gainwell probably having a little bit more in terms of the speed and elusiveness, but Gibson has better size and he's able to hold up to a beating better.
I was a little more nervous because Memphis runs a real spread offense. Like most of these running backs at Memphis are going to face real light boxes because you got to cover so many different guys. So last year with Gibson, I was a little hesitant to pull the trigger just because I didn't really know if it was going to translate. But now that Gibson did pan out just fine, it made me a little bit more excited about Gainwell. So now I feel like maybe I'm going to go too far the wrong way. Gainwell's going to be a bust, and I'm going to look, foolish because I got excited
I
about him.
wasn't too high on Gibson coming out, but yeah, the 233 and running the 4.3, that's just kind of different kind of athlete.
Yeah,
I mean, you're just betting on that.
yeah, for sure.
Like I said, I wasn't high. I don't think I drafted him anywhere last year. I had traded for him in a few places, and I'm a believer now, but I had to see it first.
Yeah,
And I guess what I'll see with Gainwell.
yeah.
Probably won't a lot of them, to be honest.
Well, over on YouTube, one of our fans, Paul, says Gainwell could lose a ton of value early on if he gets drafted as a wide receiver. That would
You want to finish that statement?
no.
Sorry.
We're not going to finish that statement. We're just going to stop it at that. He could. So that's where you run into some issues. Oh God, what's my man's name that Oakland picked up that wound up going to Miami?
Bowden.
Bowden. Thank you,
Um,
Lynn Bowden. That's the name. It was on the tip of my tongue. That would be a Lynn Bowden situation where you kind of miscast the guy and it doesn't work
yeah.
out. Like I don't know that Gainwell could do. I mean, for an extended period of time, I don't know that he could be a receiver. Like I think he's got to be a running back that gets used a little bit as a receiver, but man, I don't know.
Bowden was more just of a Swiss Army knife himself, though. I mean, he did everything at Kentucky because he had to.
Right.
He was thrown into that situation, and I was probably higher on him than I should have been last year. I still like him, especially where he's at now in Miami. But he probably will be one of those guys that ends up being better real life for the team than fantasy wise because he's just going to be used a little bit here, a little bit there, and you're never quite sure what they're going to do with him week to week.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
All right, Chad. Who do you want to talk about next? Who's your next running back that I ain't mentioned yet?
A few guys a little deeper down my list. I've been looking at Jared Patterson. I don't know, guy from Buffalo. Been looking at him, man. Kind of a smaller guy, but I love the way he runs. Kind of patient, gets in there, gets behind his blocks. Put up ridiculous numbers. Yeah, numbers only. He had 32 rushes last year with 10 yards after contact, and 10 plus yards. Yeah, that didn't come out right. Sorry about that. 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and said the most missed tackles on runs last year. You had Najee Harris leading the class, Etienne second at 183, then Jared Patterson right there third, 181 missed tackles for us, which I think is a good translatable stat. I like to see guys that can go out there and make missed tackles. The competition kind of worries me a little bit, and I don't really know how he's going to test, see how athletic he is, but. And also catching the ball. The guy goes out and catches the ball pretty decent too. So, like I said, Jared Patterson, a little under the radar guy. I'm hoping I can sneak him maybe in, maybe third, fourth rounds, stick him on there and see where he lands, see how he does. Pretty intriguing little prospect. I remember his 8 touchdown game. He's kind of became famous for that one, but he's had some monster games down there.
I love Jared Patterson. Like, he's firmly a sleeper in my mind. My only concern is that dude, like, they wore him out, man. That dude had 636 rushes in his 3 years at Buffalo. Like,
Yeah.
he was the offense. But, even in 2020 where he only carried the ball 141 times, he still had 1,000+ yards. Like, that dude,
What, 6 games?
yeah, he did it in 6 games. I mean, that dude just produces.
6 games. Yeah.
Now, obviously, he's in the MAC, but
19 touchdowns.
But this is what you want to see. Like, elite athletes and elite football players against lesser competition, he should dominate. And he dominated. So he's firmly on the radar as a sleeper for me. But, it's not so much just about the production. I mean, that is a big part of it. But, when you watch him run, like, he doesn't, like you said, he don't go down easy. That dude will continue to fight. He keeps driving. He keeps working. And even with hurt, he had that one season where he had the injured leg, he still kept playing through it and was still rushing for, a crazy amount of yards. So he's definitely a good option as a sleeper. What do you think, Kraig?
Yeah, I mean, we're all in agreement on him. He's one of the guys I had here circled in the last, 10 or so that we talked about maybe discussing. A couple more stats just to go along with what Chad was saying. For the running backs in this draft class, he's got the third most career missed tackles behind missed tackles on forced runs, according to the Pro Football Focus, behind Etienne and Harris. And he's got the third most career 50-plus yard runs. Now, some of that might have to do with competition, like you said. But, I mean, the guy can ball out. It's just a matter of, is he going to hold up with that production level in college and his size, because it does matter more in the NFL. And then how does it relate to the competition? Doing this in Buffalo in college is one thing. It's different doing it in Buffalo in the NFL. So we'll see where he goes. But like you said, he's a guy that if you can get later on and stash somewhere, I think at some point you're going to be pleasantly surprised with what he gives you in the NFL.
I agree. All right, Kraig, you're up. Who do you want to talk about?
This guy is someone who might fall to day 3. And he isn't someone that does anything like amazingly well, but he's just a well-rounded guy. Jermar Jefferson. I like him sort of like, you can probably even get him later than Patterson maybe, because Patterson, has that higher career production and all those gaudy stats and plays to show you. Jefferson, he's got patience. He's got good strength, good size. Catching is a question mark for him. And, he isn't overly elusive. He's just one of the guys that will go out there, and if you need to get like 3-4 yards, he's going to go get it for you. He doesn't go down easily, and he's just produced in college. And with a team that, isn't giving you a ton of top-level NFL talent against competition. So he's not flashy. He's not a huge name or anything right now, but I like what I see from him on the field. And, again, a guy you can get later in your drafts that I really like.
What do you think about it, Chad?
Yeah, I was actually watching a little bit of him earlier. Hadn't seen fun on but actually, I thought he was pretty good, man. I put him right in there. Got him in that tier right behind Sermon, Hill, and Gainwell. I thought he looked good. Had some good size on him. Just like you said, nothing really popped off the screen like you said, Kraig. But just looked like a decent little player guy. Be willing to take a shot on later on in the draft. Just somebody who just kind of popped to me a little bit.
Yeah, it was
Close
interesting.
enough.
After his freshman season, like he balled his freshman season. Look at the numbers,
Yeah, so he had
1,300
25
yards.
catches his
Yeah,
freshman year. Wrote that down. That
yeah.
kind of a little bit.
But then after that, he kind of, I mean, it wasn't like he didn't do anything, but it just wasn't as productive. You'd have thought after that really solid freshman campaign that it just kept going up. But, when you look at Oregon State, I mean, like you said, Kraig, Oregon State isn't pumping out a ton of high end fantasy or NFL talent. So he could definitely be a sleeper, firmly in the sleeper category because he does. Um, he probably, in my mind, he probably is a change of pace guy at the next level. So he's probably a third down type back, probably used in the passing game a little bit more. I think he could definitely be a guy that is your kind of 1B running back that gets, a fair amount of workload. He has the ability. He can take obviously he can take a beating. Um, the things that I wrote down about him I'm just looking through my notes. Good vision. Uh, he definitely sees his ability to cut back the cutback lanes, and he takes them without hesitation. He seems very confident with his running, and that's really about it. So he seems.
Yeah.
To your point, I could see him like a Jamal Williams to someone's Aaron Jones in the NFL, where he's someone that you want to have on your team, and if the main guy goes down, he could be productive for you for a while.
That is definitely fantasy relevant for sure. All right. So next up was a guy I liked a lot more this time last year, but Kylan Hill from Mississippi State. I like him now. I mean, I kind of have him as my somewhere in my back end of my top 10. 5'10", 214. Had a pretty solid career at Mississippi State. I'm gonna pull up his information now. You know, he really had a really nice 2019, which is probably why I was high on him at the end of last season before this season, because this season he didn't really play. I think he actually opted out, if I remember correctly. He played for like 3 games and then left.
Yeah, he had 23 catches in them 3 games. That was pretty nice.
Yeah. He didn't get a ton of rushes, but he got 23 catches in just 3 games.
3 games. Yeah, I was looking at that. I was like, goodness.
Yeah, but so
Yeah, I like Hill a lot. I got Hill fifth.
yeah, I'm a fan of him. His 2019 season, which would have been his junior season, 242 carries, 1,350 yards, 10 touchdowns. Add another 18 catches, 180 yards. So you see a little bit. And actually, the funniest thing is the season where he had the most rushing production, he had a very small amount of passing production. I mean, like the other seasons, he was over 20 receptions. I mean, he got more heavily involved, which was interesting to me. I like him.
Coach, maybe.
He's very versatile, but he's probably somebody's number 2. Like, I don't think he's a lead back, but he's in that next tier for me of guys that have pass catching ability. Could be a PPR guy that adds value there. What do you think about him, Chad?
Yeah, he looked strong, man. When I was watching him, breaking tackles, spinning off of them, making guys miss. Like I said, caught some balls at 23 in 3 games, and that's pretty good right there. Like I said, I don't know if they changed. Did they change coaches in the? Was it Mullen there maybe for the first 2 years or something? I'm not sure. Maybe that's why they got him going more. But anyway, yeah, just a guy. I just thought he looked good, man. Looked strong, breaking tackles, getting in there. Had 1,350 yards in the SEC. I mean, that means something, especially for Mississippi State, not the most premier program out there. But he showed well. And like I said, he sat out this year, which you don't like to see. Which I mean, I guess that's going to drop him a little bit and give people like me and you a value. But I thought he looked good. If he'd have came out and played this year, I think he'd be right in there at the top. Pretty much everybody's top 5, I believe.
Yeah, poor Mississippi State, man. They seem to always be at the bottom of the SEC, and they don't deserve it. I'm sure them fans down there in Mississippi need a little bit better from their boys. Kraig, what do you think about it, man?
Yeah, they did switch coaches because it was Leach this year, Mississippi State, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I like him a lot.
I'm about to say, I think it was a personal situation. If I remember, he's the one that had issues with maybe something that happened on campus.
Flag?
Yeah, the flag or whatever. Yeah, so it was more of a personal reason that he left the team, but he still left the team either way. Sorry, Kraig, go ahead.
Probably rubbed some people the wrong way as well, I'm sure.
One of the things that I have noted for him, which is odd for a running back, because you don't see this much anymore, but at times he's just too physical. I mean, the guy is just a beast when you look at him. He's a physical specimen. He's
Yeah.
what you'd want when you're looking at him for a running back. Plus, like you said, he's quick. He's got those cuts. He has speed. He's got the pass catching ability. It's just sometimes he's going after contact when you don't need to, which scares me from a fantasy perspective, especially if you're counting on him as a running back, which, as we know, getting a good one, you don't want him going out because he's going out there just trying to bowl a guy over when you could go around him or something. So I have that as a concern, but he's scheme versatile. Like I said, I don't think he's going to start off as a starter in the NFL, but I could see him becoming one down the line, assuming he just stays healthy and has his head going in the right direction.
Absolutely. All right, so over on YouTube, Wilson says, Chad mentioned Sermon in his top 7, but didn't Stevenson push him out of Oklahoma? Why is Stevenson below Sermon and many others that you all have mentioned? I'm hoping he's a sleeper for me. So let's talk about these two. Let's talk about Trey Sermon, who was from Oklahoma, wound up balling out at OSU, sort of, and Ramondre Stevenson, who, yeah, I mean, he's definitely a sleeper to some. But Chad, what do you think about those two?
Yeah, I mean, college depth charts. I mean, I do look at them, but I mean, like I said, college coaches do a lot of things for a lot of different reasons. I remember Jalen Hurd. I'm a Carolina fan. I used to run all over us with Alvin Kamara on the bench. There's some reason coaches, I don't know why. To me, Sermon obviously looks like a better player, especially when he went up there at Ohio State. I mean, especially them last 3 games. What do you have? Was it 323 on Northwestern in the Big Ten title game, and then followed that up with 190 on Clemson. So, I mean, he looked good towards the end of the year. As high pedigree guy, runs hard. Done a little bit in receiving game. He probably, see a little more there, but he said he runs hard. So a guy I'm probably going to be looking to get late 2nd round, hopefully in 3rd round, maybe if he can drop that far. But Stevenson, yeah, I don't know. He just seems a step slow for me. I don't, maybe that works in college, but I don't see him translating over. I don't think he has. I don't know how he's tested or if he even has, but I wouldn't anticipate it being that well.
How about you, Mr. Kraig?
Yeah, so Sermon's an interesting case. Like you said, he's a high pedigree guy that was, well looked upon and then just couldn't completely figure it out, it seems. He did at the end of the tenure at Ohio State, however short that it was, which to me, stepping up in those big moments, when they're put upon you and you haven't done a whole lot on team, I think that does say something about him. And he, when the spotlight was on him, he showed up and he performed. And I think he's going to be a guy that would shoot up fantasy drafts if he goes to a landing spot where he's competing for a starting position, because I think he could be a starter in the NFL. He doesn't have the best long speed, but, most of these guys just aren't track athletes out there, and you aren't going to be running track on most of your plays anyway. Chad mentioned receiving, so there's some question marks just because he didn't have to do it a whole lot. I didn't see anything showing me that he couldn't do it, but he just wasn't called upon a lot to do it. And then, sometimes he was too much of an upright runner for me. But again, that's something that you can coach out of a guy if he's willing to. Whereas Stevenson, I have him as he has a lot of okay to good, but he wasn't just, sort of like Jefferson. I have them close to each other. He didn't really just stand out anything to me. Catching was an issue for Stevenson that I saw, which today's NFL we know, and especially for fantasy, that's going to get you fantasy points, and most places have some sort of PPR going on. But he was able to break tackles. He could make people miss. He's got balance. He's got vision. He just isn't one of those guys that's, can break off a long one for you. He's probably more of a 2-down or goal line type of back in the NFL from what I saw, which isn't as useful for fantasy most of the time if you're looking consistently over a fantasy career.
Yeah, I'd feel better about, at least from the Sermon side, I'd feel better about Sermon if I didn't see, like, if the dude could just stay on the field consistently for a long period of time. Like, I'm going to hit our comments first. So our boy Joe over on Facebook says, the same reason you can't say Haskins pushed Burrow out of Ohio State. hate that he brings Ohio State in every conversation, but that's just Joe.
We talked about it last week. It's the same thing with Fromm and Fields.
Right.
Teams do things for, like Chad said, a lot of different reasons. There's a lot more politicking in college, and I think sometimes we know
much better than T. Yeah.
And
every time I watched Sermon, gave him some juice when he come in, and Teague. I mean, they rode him for the first half of the year. I mean, when they finally let Sermon, get loose, I mean, he played well.
Yeah. What up, Matt? Paul also says Kennedy Brooks was the guy who really kicked Sermon out, but then he opted out. He basically wasn't assured of getting a huge role, so he transferred. So,
yeah,
and that's a tough thing. I mean, like we've said, teams do what teams do. We can't determine what a coach decides or doesn't decide to do with his team. Sermon is a quality big back. I think if you get him as kind of a 2-down type guy, I think he'd be fine. I don't know how super fantasy relevant he's going to be, especially in this class. There's plenty of other running backs that I like more that can give you more than what Sermon can give you. I just don't know that he can handle a heavy workload for a long period of time. Stevenson, on the other hand, he just didn't. I mean, he got involved, but he just didn't get as involved in the offense as I would have expected to see. When you look back at his career, had less than 200 carries in his 2 years at Oklahoma. Like, he really should have. I mean, I know he was a JUCO transfer, but I just didn't see enough to get excited about him long term. His upright running style, his kind of the big power back. I mean, feel like if this was like 15 years ago, like he'd be a sweet running back. Just kind of the big back that just powers over people, stuff like. It's like when we talk about linebackers and we say like the Josie Jewells of the world were great in the 90s, but they're not so much now, Like Stevenson probably would have been great in the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm not super high on him right now because there's plenty of other guys that I like. That's just me. All right. Chuba Hubbard. So this was a guy that was a hot name for a little while. Then he got injured. Then he came back and didn't really perform all that well. He's a guy that I still want to get a couple shares of. I actually think I have a Devi share too.
I sent him to you.
Yeah, about to say I think I have a Devi share or two of him. He's representing the Great White North, so our boy Sully should love him. He's a Canadian through and through. What do you guys think about him? I'll start with you, Kraig. How do you feel about Chuba Hubbard?
All right. I feel he's one of the guys, we haven't talked about a lot of them, but where he goes into what sort of scheme is going to matter for him, because I see him as a guy that's dependent on a zone blocking type scheme. His pass blocking was not what I'd want it to be, and he caught the ball and all that, but he didn't catch the ball well. I had issues with how he would catch the ball at times, not using his hands and more body catches, which in the NFL just doesn't end up being great. But if you want to compare athlete-wise, just in terms of agility, the quickness, speed, he's up there with Etienne, like in those sort of things where he's got that long-term speed. He can kick it up. He's got the ability to break some tackles. But there's just too many questions that I have for him that I would have wanted another year to, I wanted him to play this year to just see him work on some of those things. He had, like you said, a breakout year the year prior, but with some of those questions, how our team's going to view that in the NFL, I think is going to tell us a lot. Because we've seen guys before that, talk about a different position, but someone like, Hakeem Butler, who was the darling of many people's eyes in fantasy, mine included, and then the NFL, for whatever reason, just decides, yeah, you're not what everyone else is seeing. If Hubbard has a fall like that, I think there's a bigger chance he ends up just not being anything much in the NFL as opposed to a sleeper. So draft capital is going to matter a lot for how I view him for fantasy.
All right, Chad, what about you, brother?
I was watching some of them today. Like I said, I see the long speed, but I mean, there wasn't too much else I was really impressed with. The lateral quickness in and out, I didn't see a whole lot of that. He just tackled real easily. And like I said, didn't do a whole lot in the receiving game either. I wasn't the guy I was too big of a fan of. He said maybe in the right system or something. He does have speed. Once he get out there and gets to rolling, I mean, get him in some space. But I wasn't the biggest fan of. He didn't even crack my top 10 on that.
Well, Brad, you're going to be the Hubbard truther here, so
no, that's okay.
have at it.
I see. Jason over on YouTube says Hubbard's burst and speed is great, but he doesn't seem being able to take a beating. So he wrestled with, I think it was like ankle issues this year, which caused him to wind up just opting out. Like he was like in and out of 7 games, and he just couldn't stop fighting that ankle injury, and it just stopped. So I don't know. Like I loved what I saw in 2019. A real breakout season from him, and even in 2018. I think he has the ability to step in and really be involved in an offense, but I don't see him as a guy that can be a lead back and handle a 3-down workload. Like this is a guy that I think you can get involved second down, possibly third down out of the backfield, because when I watched him in the few passes and in the catches that he did get, because he had 50 some receptions in his college career. He wasn't fighting the ball. Like he was a pretty natural hands receiver. Some of these running backs feel like they don't want to catch the ball, and they're like frying pan handing the thing as they're trying to catch it. Like he's pretty good at it. So I think a team could envision him as kind of a 2-down type back and be part of a committee. So I think there's fantasy value. I just don't know that he's right now. He's not and the funny thing is he's not, as much as I like him, he's not in my top 10 either. I mean, there's so many backs I like in this draft class that even a guy that I own shares of, I can't consider a top 10 back in this class. But I do think he has some value if he can get over those injuries, over that lower body injury, the ankle, and really bounce back from that. I think he can provide value because a kid that was a track star and highly productive in high school and highly productive at points in college, like I think there's something there, but I just don't know, I just don't know what a team's going to see because there's so many nice backs in this draft class. Like for me, I think he's probably a day 3 prospect at best, which I don't know. I mean, it's not super exciting.
Well, I mean, that's a big fall when you're considering if you're rewind this a year where people are potentially talking about him going if he has another nice year in college.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I see the chat talking about Bryce Love. That one hurts my heart, man. I loved some Bryce Love coming out of Stanford. I still have him on a couple taxi squads, hoping that he finally is able to play football again. But things ain't looking so good for Bryce Love in Washington. But that's the tough thing. I mean, you never can tell with these guys, especially running backs, that they just don't have the longevity. Some of these guys can go. I mean, like who'd have guessed Adrian Peterson still be doing it at 78 years old? I mean, like some guys can do it, but it's just not for everybody, man. You take a beating. All right, so
yeah,
Kraig, who do you want to talk about? We're getting close to the end of the show, so I'll let you guys handle it. Who do you want to talk about next?
There's 2 guys that I have that are very similar in my rankings that are, again, later type picks, but given their what I see as to be electric ability, sure, we'll call it that, electric ability, explosiveness, speed, ability to catch and make something out of nothing. The only real question is their size. So, again, we talked about sort of like Patterson, how they're going to hold up. Khalil Herbert and Javian Hawkins, I mean, they're size-wise, they're similar. I saw a lot of similarities in how they played, and they probably top out in today's NFL as sort of a third down back, receiving back. But again, we talked about that's going to have fantasy relevance if they get called upon to be that guy for a team. So if we're talking guys later in the draft, your mid to late rounds that you can maybe stash somewhere like a Bryce Love, knock on wood that it's better than that. I like what they are in today's NFL. They're not going to hold up to sort of those 20 touches a game or anything either long term, but what they can bring to you on those few touches is, some potentially flex appeal, or if you start 3 running backs in a deeper league, something like that.
What do you think about those 2, Chad?
I didn't hear the first one. I did hear Herbert. I looked at Herbert. I liked him. He looked pretty good. Said he ran with a little speed, ran with power too, but he's a little older. Was he 23 or something going out? I think it's his 5th year, but I didn't hear the first guy. But one guy I did want to mention. I don't know, Pooka Williams, Kansas.
Yep.
Ran a 4.38 the other day at the pro day. I think he opted out this time. I think he maybe played a couple games, but when I watched him, an explosive guy, looked good out of the backfield. What was he, 100? He weighed in 175 pounds a day, so I mean that wasn't too bad either. And I don't know, like I said, a guy you're probably gonna be able to snag late in your draft,
Yeah.
maybe in fourth, fifth round. And that kid, he's got some juice. I like Pooka.
Yeah.
How the NFL views him with that character concern that he had in college
Yeah,
is going to
he's
be really
feisty too. That's
telling.
what I like him. He kind of, he tells you about it out there. I like guys that play with a little energy like that. Shy Smith, he gets out there, he's fiery, and I like guys like that.
I like it too.
Hopefully,
It's just going to depend what the NFL thinks of, when they're talking to him in those interviews. Like, is he going to be able to explain that, and teams going to feel comfortable taking that chance on him? If they are, draft capital again. Is he going to be a 6th-round pick, or is he going to be a 4th-round pick? That'll be a big difference for his fantasy value.
Yeah, for sure. Rick over on YouTube, I should say Ricky over on YouTube. Let's talk about Amari Rodgers potentially being the next Antonio Gibson.
Running back drills today. Yeah, ran a good number too. I think it was 4.45.
He looked real good running them running back drills, but
looks like a running back.
He does. I mean, was he like 5'10", like 210 or something ish? I mean, he's solid. The tough thing for Rodgers, like I don't remember how much did Clemson really use him in that role. Like I don't remember him getting a lot of action rushing, so it's hard to really tell. Yeah. Okay, yeah, in the drills he looked good, but like what they do with him, yeah, okay. So he didn't get used in the rushing game. So I would have to go back and see, but I don't know, man. I don't see him being able to be a really high-end receiver at the next level just because there's so many. So I think he has to have that kind of versatility to be a back as well. But without being able to see him do it on tape and live game action, I can't argue it, but I don't really know, Oh, he says he also ran with the running backs up until his senior year where he went wide receiver. He was productive this year for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like Amari Rodgers, the player, though. Like I hope the best because the tough thing for a guy like that is he was stuck behind the Justin Rosses and T Higgins and all these like high end receivers. Like he had to wait till this year to really get his chance. But
had a couple guys get hurt for that to happen too.
For sure.
Nada and
I think he could run into that same issue that we talked about with Bowden. If you're going to use him that way, are you going to commit to him as a running back? Are you going to commit to him as a wide receiver? Or are you going to have him some sort of in-between land where maybe he has value one year, maybe another year he doesn't? Landing spot's going to matter for that because, he's not going to be a guy that's drafted in the first, probably not the second round either. But he does have the skills to be a weapon. It's just, is someone going to take advantage of that? Or is he going to go to Oakland where he's stuck behind 5 other receivers and no one knows how to use them?
Right.
Or I'm sorry, I keep saying Oakland. They'll forever be Oakland to me because that's what I grew up with. The Vegas Raiders.
I'll say Los Angeles Raiders, Vegas Raiders. I mean, they've been everywhere at this point. I like it, Rick. We're putting it down as a hot take. Next Antonio Gibson is Amari Rodgers. We'll say it here on the show, and we'll forever brand it in the annals of YouTube. Joe wants to know, is Max Borghi a sleeper or nothing? I like Max Borghi. I think I even own a share of him in some Devy league. It might even be this one.
From me. Yeah.
I think he's got potential. I'm glad that he stuck around for another year. I mean, I think it'd be good for him. And next year's draft class looks a lot weaker at running back, so he could be. Well, Kraig, how do you feel about him? Obviously, you got rid of him, so you probably don't like him that much. But
I liked him a lot. Initially he was one of those guys that a lot of people weren't looking at, and then he started making a name for himself for a year, and then I think people got some tape on him, and they kind of soured on him a bit. But best case scenario for me, he's Danny Woodhead, which is fine in the NFL for a later pick, but he's no one that I think is going to be a long-term starter in the league.
Okay, there you go. Chad, you have any thoughts on Max Borghi?
Yeah, I pretty much echo that. I haven't watched a ton of him because he didn't declare. So, but from what I've seen, like I pretty much echo everything Kraig said. maybe a PPR guy, and hope for the best.
Yeah. So hopefully one more year of college will help him out, and we'll see
Yeah.
what happens. So we're gonna sit firmly on the sleeper with a slight chance of nothing. Who knows?
There you
All
go.
right. So the chat is rolling with lots of fun comments and interesting things, but it's 10:30, so we're out of here. This was fun. We got through a bunch of running backs. I would encourage you guys, if most of you probably are subscribed over on YouTube, but subscribe because we will continue to drop individual videos on these players, on running backs, on wide receivers, the entire 2021 class. I'm pumping out videos on the regular, and Rick's getting them ready and getting them posted. So you guys will have lots of content to enjoy. Chad, it was awesome having you on, brother. I love talking to you. It was great time.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, man.
We'll talk to you guys next week. Take care of yourselves. We'll talk to you Monday night. We're going to be talking IDP safeties. Thank you, Kraig. Kraig's keeping me in line. We're going to be talking safeties on Monday night, and then next week we'll be talking wide receivers with our boy Joe Kidder, and that'll be exciting because I'm going to mess with him the whole night, so it'll be fun. We'll talk to you guys again next